12:39 p.m. Ew, Erwin Wonk said, pointing at my face as we sat on the swing set that we were way too old for. Erwin and I have been friends ever since kindergarten after discovering that we both like to use potato chips to scrape the ice cream off our ice cream sandwiches. He was a pretty good kid, and we went over to each other's houses a lot. One day we decided to be best friends. I guess because best friend sounds better than only friend. But that was before I had a big blotch on my face. I'm not sure I can be friends with you anymore, Erwin went on. I mean, look at that thing. First of all, it's called a blotch, I told him. And second of all, I feel lousy enough without you being all mean about it. Why don't you and your lisp go somewhere else? Profile. Name, Erwin Wonk. Best friend. Age, 11. Occupation, talking too much. Interests, picks his nose when he thinks no one is looking. Erwin looked hurt, and even though he had insulted me at first, I felt a little guilty. He had a pretty bad lisp, which he was embarrassed about. Secretly, I liked his lisp, though, because it sounded really weird, and also because it meant he was less likely to find some other kid to be best friends with. I'll take it back if you take it back, I added. He thought for a second, then nodded. Okay, deal. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Daisy. My heart immediately made a weird somersault. Daisy Flowers. Daisy Flowers. Daisy Flowers. Fact. You can tell what a girl is like from her name. Daisy had moved into the house directly across from mine at the beginning of the summer, and ever since then, Erwin and I had both talked a lot about her, but we were both way too scared to actually talk to her. We didn't really talk to any girls, especially ones named Daisy Flowers. You totally like Daisy, Erwin said. I totally do not, I said back. You totally like Daisy. That's a lie. We sat there glaring at each other. The truth was, Erwin and I both liked Daisy Flowers. Let's go over to her house and see if she wants to hang out, Erwin suggested. Maybe later, I said. Erwin stomped his foot. Not later, now. You guys are friends. I want to be friends too. We're not friends, I corrected. You totally are, he insisted. We had one conversation. That's one more than I've had. I sighed. Erwin was really jealous of that conversation, even though it had lasted exactly 8 seconds. One day when I was outside reading, Daisy came out of her house. She noticed me, stopped, and actually walked over. What are you reading? She'd asked. Fangs for the Memories by Elroy Evans, I'd told her. Jonas Forrester gets amnesia and forgets he's a vampire until he bites the nurse who's taking care of him. But then he remembers and saves all the patients from an evil doctor who's taking their kidneys and selling them. Profile. Name, Daisy Flowers. Neighbor. Age, a perfect 10. Occupation, being perfect. Interests, perfection. That sounds good, Daisy had said. Gross, but good. Gotta go. Okay, bye, I'd said. Later when I told Erwin about it, he got really mad. He thought Daisy and I had decided to be friends without him. He wanted to be friends with her too, and he'd been really annoying about it ever since. Well, I don't care what you do. I'm going over to her house, Erwin was saying now. Yeah, right. Yeah, right yourself. I tried to change the subject. What kind of dog do you think I should get? Do you want to come over tonight and meet him? Erwin shrugged. Sure, maybe I'll come over for dinner or something. He loved our selection of ice cream and cookies. It was one of the side benefits of having a dad home to do all the shopping instead of a mom. Did you know Hank Barlow has a cool police dog named Justice? I asked Erwin. I think he's a German Shepherd. Jonah Forrester doesn't have a dog, but I bet if he did, it would be a Doberman Pinscher or something like that. Erwin rolled his eyes. What is it with you and Hank Barlow and those stupid Jonah Forrester books? That police show is like 100 years old, and vampires aren't even real. And that's cool you're getting a dog, but it's kind of dumb to talk about what kind, because you're just going to go to the shelter and get whatever's available. He glanced back toward Daisy's house. Come on, let's go over. I was in the middle of deciding whether to yell at him because of his dumb idea to go to Daisy's house, or yell at him because of all his mean insults about Hank Barlow and Jonah Forrester when Misty stuck her head out the front door. "Lunch, brats," she hollered. Whenever Misty had to babysit me, she was the worst person alive. I think it was because she hated doing it. She wanted to make sure I was just as miserable as she was. "Great," I exclaimed, happy that Misty had saved me from a possibly really embarrassing situation. We were just getting ready to go inside when we heard a noise from across the street. The sound of Daisy's front door. Sure enough, out she came, dressed in a bathing suit. A few seconds later, her mom followed, carrying some towels. We stared. "I wonder where they're going," Irwin said. "Maybe swimming," I said. "You two are pathetic," Misty said. Daisy started walking to her car, but before she got in, she looked over at us and gave us a wave. That was all Irwin needed, and he broke into a huge smile. "See, I told you. I knew she liked me. Excellent." Just between you and me, when he said excellent, it sounded more like excellent. 4:16 p.m. So my dad's version of getting home in a few hours was basically 8 hours later. I waited by the front door trying to stay calm. It didn't work. "Where's Dad?" I screamed at Misty, who was blasting music while combing her hair for the 62nd time that day. "How should I know?" she screamed back, turning up the music. "I hate you," I screamed louder. "I hate you more," she screamed loudest. It was kind of a routine we had. 4:56 p.m. Finally, Dad pulled into the driveway, honking his horn. "Get in, we're late." "We're late? We?" "Where were you?" I asked, but I could tell he was totally distracted. "Dad, stop staring at your phone." "I'm waiting for an important call," he said, which I guess was his version of an apology. Fact. Dads are horrible at apologizing. "About the job?" I asked. "Yeah." On the way to the shelter, neither of us talked for a few minutes. I could tell he was nervous. "So I can get any dog I want?" I asked. "Sure," said my dad, "as long as it's between 14 and 19 months old and weighs between 25 and 35 pounds. "That's not exactly any dog," I grumbled as the GPS lady told us to take a left. "Mom talked to somebody at work who's a big-time animal lover," Dad said. "She says we should get a dog who's past the crazy puppy phase but still young enough to be fun and playful. And size-wise, I don't want one of those tiny fluffy dogs that movie stars put in their pocketbooks. But I also don't want one of those monster dogs that takes up the entire couch." Those ground rules sounded a little strict to me. What if I wanted to get a dog that was 37 pounds? "But Dad..." "No buts." He turned the radio on and started drumming on the steering wheel. Conversation officially over. 5:06 p.m. When I walked into the Northport Animal Rescue Foundation, otherwise known as Northport ARF, dogs and cats of all shapes and sizes tried to get my attention. It was like a kickball game and I was the captain, and they were all yelling, "Pick me, pick me." But it wasn't a kickball game. It was real life. And they all wanted me to take them home so they could feel safe and warm and loved. "Look," I yelled, "they're so cute. I want all of them." Even my dad, who was staring at his phone, waiting for it to ring, seemed to be affected by all the cuteness. He actually smiled a few times, but he shook his head. "Nice try, Jimmy. You know the deal. One dog." He pointed at a beagle that was jumping in circles. "And nothing too crazy. We don't want our house ripped to shreds." Fact. If you consider yourself not that popular of a person, go to an animal shelter. You will feel really popular really fast. I noticed a Cocker Spaniel that was wagging its tail and barking. "How about that one?" My dad shook his head again. "I'm not sure I can listen to that barking all night, and the neighbors would hate us." I soon discovered that my dad had a reason to turn down pretty much every dog I pointed at or played with. Too big, too small, too hairy, too smelly, too loud, too sleepy, too young, too playful. My dad was too annoying. I knew it. This whole thing was a setup. He said we would get a dog only so I would stop whining about my blotch and he could go to his stupid interview. The blotch was still there, by the way, in case you were wondering. I was about to give up when we rounded the last corner of the last room in the whole place and saw this tiny dark cage in the corner. All I could see were two bright lights shining straight at me. As I walked closer, I realized they weren't lights at all. They were eyes. I ran over to the cage and looked in. There was a scruffy little dog just lying there. He looked like a combination of 1,000 different breeds. He had spots, he had stripes. His eyes were 2 different colors, his ears were 2 different shapes, and he had a big black streak of fur right down his back, almost like a cape. He was wagging his tail sleepily, and he had the cutest, saddest face I'd ever seen. In other words, he was awesome. I ran over to one of the guys who worked there. "Hi, is this dog available? Is he nice?" The guy nodded. "Oh, she's a bit of a loner, likes to sleep all day, but she's wide awake at night. The doc thinks her eyes are super sensitive to light for some reason. A total sweetheart, though." "Oh, so he was a she. I'd always imagined having a boy dog. Oh, well. How old is she?" "About 1.5 years. "How much does she weigh?" The guy scratched his head. "What is this, the 3rd degree? I'd say about 30 pounds. "Yes, perfect. Dad, I found her. Dad was still messing around with his phone. "Oh, yeah? Come quick." He sighed and walked over to the cage to take a look. After about a minute, he asked the worker guy, "Can you please take her out so we can say hi?" The guy opened the cage and brought the dog over. As I started petting her, she looked right into my eyes. I swear she was smiling. I could swear she was smiling. She seemed sleepy, but she was so cute. She didn't look like any dog I'd ever seen before. "What kind of dog is she?" I asked. "A whole lot of everything," said the guy. "What's her name?" The guy laughed. "Whatever you want it to be. Let me take a look," my dad said. The guy handed him the dog with no name. My dad stood there for a few seconds, just kind of staring at her. He didn't look very enthusiastic. In fact, he looked like he was reconsidering the whole thing. I started to think this whole dog thing would never happen. All of a sudden, the dog stretched, pulled her head back, and sneezed right in my dad's face. That's right. You heard me. Fact. If you're in the middle of adopting a dog, try to make sure it doesn't sneeze in your dad's face. "Blah," my dad said. He scowled as he handed the dog to me, while the worker guy tried not to laugh. "Dad?" I said. But I knew it was over. There was no way we were getting this dog. Then my dad's phone rang. He looked at the phone, then he looked at me. "You better get it." As my dad walked off down the hall, I waited there with the dog still in my hands. She was pretty heavy, so I sat down on the floor. "Why did you have to sneeze right then?" I asked her, but she wouldn't answer. After 3 or 4 long minutes, my dad came back. His eyes were sparkling. "Looks like I got a good shot," he said, giving me a big hug. "They want me to come back in tomorrow afternoon to meet some other people. They say I'm the leading candidate." "That's great, Dad." He bent down and stared into the dog's eyes. "Hey, maybe you're a good luck charm after all." Then my dad looked at the guy who worked there. "We'll take her." My heart did a somersault. I couldn't believe it. I was getting a dog. Finally. I gave the dog a big bear hug, or I guess dog hug, and when she licked me back, I was pretty sure she winked at me. That was the moment I first started wondering if she had secret powers. 5:33 p.m. How Abby became Abby. My dad had to do a bunch of paperwork for the shelter before we could take our new dog home. At the same time, he was talking on the phone to my mom and emailing the people who were setting up his next interview. "They want a name," he said to me. "Jimmy Bishop," I told him. Dad rolled his eyes. "For the dog." "Oh." Fact. Sometimes kids get dumber in front of their parents. I looked at the dog. The dog looked back at me. She had the cutest face I'd ever seen, but also the saddest. I wanted to name her something that would make her a little less sad. "Happy," I said to my dad. Let's name her Happy." "Got it," he said. I wasn't sure if he was saying that to me or to my mom on the phone. Then he wrote something down and handed the paperwork to the lady who ran the shelter. "Congratulations," she said. "Getting a dog is a wonderful thing, both for your family and your pet." She looked down at the paperwork. "Abby is a very lucky girl." "Huh?" I stared at my dad. Abby? He stared back. What? That's what you said. I looked at the dog, who had been named Happy, for about 7 seconds. But you know what? I didn't care what her name was, as long as she was mine. Hi, Abby, I said. I'm Jimmy.